Hello, and welcome to another episode of No Brains Just Ball. I know we've been missing in action for most of the season as it's hard to get together, the four of us. So today it's just going to be myself, Jake, your host, and hopefully towards the playoffs and the end of the season we'll get Dem, Anthony, and Nick back on the show. Although we'll be missing the three guys today, we will be speaking to another guy today called Matt. He's very new to the game of basketball. He's watched a season and a half so far, and he's going to give us some of his predictions for the rest of the year on some of the awards and maybe who's going to win the Eastern Conference, Western Conference, and who's going to end up as the champions. So let's get things going. I'm going to be giving you my predictions that I gave at the start of the year for the Western Conference standings and to see how well I've gone through the season so far. So at the start of the season, I had Boston as your as winning the Eastern Conference. Then I had Cleveland, Washington, Milwaukee, Toronto, Miami, Philadelphia, and Detroit. So going by what it is now, the 28th of March 2018, I'm only missing out on one, which is Indiana. And Detroit is the only one I have in there that is only just out anyway. They're in the 9th position at the moment. So the top of the table is Toronto at the moment, followed by Boston, Cleveland, and Philadelphia in 4th. Indiana, who I got wrong, are in 5th. Washington, Miami, and Milwaukee. My predictions probably need a little bit of a shuffle, but all in all, I've done pretty well with the Eastern Conference and picking who's probably going to make playoffs in the end of this year. I'd have to say the East standings are pretty set with Detroit 5 games back with 10 games to go in the season in 9th position. Milwaukee's in 8th now at 39-35 and Detroit's at 34-40. I wouldn't say that Detroit have a chance, so the East looks pretty set, but obviously the positions I think can shuffle a little bit towards the end of the season. Already in the East, there are 5 spots clinched by teams. Obviously Toronto at the top with 55-20 already locked their spot. Boston Celtics in 2nd, Cleveland Cavs in 3rd, Philly in 4th, and Indiana in 5th. They're all cemented their spots. Washington, Miami, and Milwaukee can still get caught by Detroit and possibly Charlotte, but doesn't look likely. I would say their spots may be safe if I was to hazard a guess there. Moving on to the West standings, this is where I went a bit off the tracks. Here, I got a couple wrong at the moment. So my predictions for the Western Conference standings this year were Golden State, Houston, OKC in 3rd, then San Antonio rounding out the top 4. Then I had the LA Clippers, then Minnesota, Memphis, and then Utah to round out the top 8. At the moment, the West standings are Houston as number 1, Golden State, Portland, and Oklahoma. Then New Orleans, San Antonio, Utah, and Minnesota. Closely followed by the Clippers, who are 1 game out, and Denver, who are 2 games out. The West is probably a lot more congested than the East and could go anywhere from 3rd to 10th. Could miss out on the playoffs. So it's very, very congested. At the moment, the Clippers are 9th and Denver are 10th. So I don't think it's hard to measure up who's going to actually finish in those top 8 positions. They've each got pretty similar draws. They're each playing each other towards the end of the year. So it's going to be whoever's playing their best basketball at the moment. But all in all, I don't think it's really going to matter because I think the 2 teams that have already clinched their spots in the playoffs from the West, the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors, are going to play off in the Western Conference Finals. I'd have to say some surprises in the standings in general with the East and the West is I'm very surprised that Toronto is leading the Eastern Conference at 55-20. They've been dominant all year. Then I'm not too surprised with Boston in 2nd, Cleveland in 3rd, Philly. They're in 4th at the moment, but could drop as far as probably 7th or 8th. And then the rest I'm not really too surprised about. I predicted pretty well within the Eastern Conference. In the West, I went pretty wrong with Memphis, guessing they'd finish around 7th, and they're way down the bottom. They're in 14th position at 20-54. I didn't anticipate Mike Conley being out for most of the year and losing players and injuries. So I think the one prediction that I was way off on was Memphis making the playoffs. But all in all, I think I've done pretty well with both. We'll just have to see who's going to make the playoffs after 82 games. Now that we've looked at the top half of the conferences and who might be playing in the playoffs, I thought we'd turn it around and have a look, see at the bottom at which teams haven't got the best records this season, and maybe looking at some early draft picks. With the worst record in the NBA at the moment currently, with 2 weeks to go in the season, we have the Phoenix Suns at 19 and 56, closely followed by the Memphis Grizzlies, which is a bit shocking at 20 and 54. So still plenty of time for teams to lose a couple of games to try and finish and get the chance of getting that number 1 pick. Next we have Atlanta, the next worst record at 21 and 53. Then Orlando, 22 wins. Dallas and Brooklyn with 23. And then the next two, Sacramento and Chicago. Chicago have done a lot better than I thought they would after losing Jimmy Butler last season. I think they've got a bright future there with Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, their pick this year. I think they're well on the rise. As we go higher down the bottom, we got the New York Knicks, 27 wins, another team I'm pretty surprised about. I think it's on the back of the GOAT, Mike Beasley, putting up points for them. Also, I think their centre, Enes Kanter, has been huge this year. I believe he's averaging not a triple-double, a double-double for them, starting for them at centre. Has been hard for them this year after losing Kristaps Porzingis, but they've recovered well, and I think they're worthy of the record of 27 and 48. And I believe that next year, if they can get Porzingis back towards the end of the year and maybe pick up a few players in the off-season, they may be able to push for that 8th spot in the Eastern Conference. Closing out the top 10 from the bottom, we've got the Lakers, obviously not going to make playoffs, unfortunately for LeVar Ball and his predictions earlier in the season. But they've had a good year. They've obviously got 2 young rising stars in Kuzma and Lonzo. They look good for the next few years, I think. I think they're going to be a team to look for next year, especially in free agency, with them having a lot of cap room ready maybe for possibly Paul George or even a LeBron James if that comes to fruition. As it has been a long time in between podcasts, I thought I'd have a look at a couple of the injuries that may have shaped the season throughout the year. Obviously starting with the Boston Celtics, first game of the season, Gordon Hayward, brutal injury to his ankle. Won't play at all this season, hopefully looking to get back for the start of the 2018-19 season. Also at the moment, the Celtics are also without Kyrie Irving for the regular season. He's got a bit of a knee complaint, so the Celtics are going to be a bit cautious with him and leave him out for the remainder of the regular season and hope he's ready for playoffs. During the year, the Chicago Bulls have had a fair amount of injuries. They didn't get Zach LaVine back until not long ago, and now he's also been sidelined with that same knee complaint, and he's just going to be out for the year. There's no point playing him anymore. Another team that's been a bit struck by injuries this year has actually been the Golden State Warriors, and they've all been injured as of late. In March, at the moment, Curry has a knee, possibly an ankle problem, and will be out until the second round of playoffs. Kevin Durant has been out, looks likely to come back tomorrow, and Klay Thompson's also been out with a thumb injury. Hopefully will get back this Sunday. As always, one of the most injury-rattled teams is my Los Angeles Clippers. Danilo Gallinari has just lived up to being the injury-prone man that he is. He's had problems with his glute twice and also his hand. He's only played about 25 to 30 games maybe for the entirety of the season. They lost Patrick Beverley, who they gained in the Chris Paul trade. He had knee surgery early on in the season, only played a handful of games. And also the 30-year-old rookie Milos Teodosic has also missed a fair few games with a plantar fasciitis injury, which is the heel / bottom of the foot type injury, and never really gets better. It only works. It only gets better by staying off it for a little bit, so he may miss a few games, as he injured that same foot today against the Milwaukee Bucks. Minnesota only had the one major injury this season, and that was one of their star recruits, Jimmy Butler, who unfortunately went down with a knee injury on Feb 23, and he's out indefinitely. I don't know whether he'll be back for the playoffs. I would be very surprised to see him back at all. The New Orleans Pelicans, also an injury to one of their big stars. A few big stars this season have been injured, unfortunately, which hasn't made for good watching in some games. But DeMarcus Cousins, Achilles injury, January 26, only played half the season. Not going to be back until next season, so hopefully the Pelicans can lift their game and hopefully get through the playoffs and see what they can do there. Probably not one of their major players on their team, but a key role player for the Oklahoma City Thunder, Andre Roberson. He went out with what I think was a knee injury, or I saw a replay and he fell right on the back on his coccyx. It's either his knee or his coccyx, I'm unsure about that. But he looks out for the season, or is out for the season. And the Thunder are just missing that defensive role player that they had in their starting lineup. If we're talking about big name players missing out on games this year, the last one I can think of is John Wall, who was sidelined on the 27th of January and hasn't returned since with a knee injury. He's targeting around now for a return, hopefully in the next week or so. I'm thinking it might be about a week into April, I think. Gets him a few games before the playoff run for the Wizards starts. So, as fans, we're hoping some of these key players can return to their teams just in time for the playoff run, as I'm sure it will make for better watching and better games in the playoffs. As we've been missing for most part of the year, I might go through a few of the stats and who's leading at the moment with all the stats. So at the moment, the points per game, we've got Harden at 30.7 points per game, Davis at 28, and LeBron at 27.5. So they're your top 3 points per game players. Leading the assists, you have Russell Westbrook, LeBron with 9, and Harden with 8.7. So Harden doing both. Rebounds per game, you've got Drummond with 15.9, DeAndre Jordan from the Clippers with 15.4. And the Hall of Famer, I think, in a few years' time, Dwight Howard, coming in third with the 12.4 rebounds per game. Blocks per game, we've got Anthony Davis once again. He's been dominating ever since Boogie Cousins went down towards the middle of the year. He's just been on a massive stretch. Been killing it this second half of the year. He's got 2.4 blocks. Then you have the next three, Durant, Miles Turner from the Pacers, and Clint Capella from the Rockets, all with 1.9 blocks per game. Steals per game, got Victor Oladipo at the top with 2.3, and then Paul George, Eric Bledsoe, and Chris Dunn. Good to see the Bulls have a player in those top stats with 2 steals per game. We'll move on to the rookies now. There's been some dominant rookies this season. Leading the rookies in points per game, you've got Donovan Mitchell with 20.3 points per game. He's been an absolute beast this season. Then you've got the GOAT, Ben Simmons from Australia with 16.1 points per game. And the second round masterpiece of Kyle Kuzma, who's come out of nowhere. The Lakers picked him up in the second round this year, and he's been an absolute steal for them this season. Next, we'll move on to the assists with rookies. You've got Simmons with 7.7. Lonzo Ball, 7.1. He's had a decent season, been injured a little bit, but he's had a good season so far. And then you got the 30-year-old rookie, Milos Teodosic from the LA Clippers, averaging 5 assists per game, coming in third in all rookies. Next we have rebounds per game, and yes, it's that man again, Ben Simmons, averaging 7.8 rebounds per game. The rookie from the Bulls, Lauri Markkanen, is averaging 7.6 games, and has looked really good this season. I think he's going to develop into a nice player. Bit of a stretch for with the 3 ball he's got going. And then we have John Collins rounding out the rebounds per game for the rookies with 7.1, and he's plays for the Atlanta Hawks. Next, you got blocks per game. Obviously, not a lot of rookies get a lot of minutes, so the blocks and steals like that are a bit low. You got John Collins leading the blocks per game at 1.1, and then you got Jordan Bell from the Golden State Warriors with 1, and then Jared Allen from the Brooklyn Nets, who's been starting as of late with 1 block per game as well. Moving on to steals, as I said, Ball 1.7 steals per game, and the beast Ben Simmons with 1.7. So you can see Simmons has been dominating the stats all year for rookies, and then Mitchell rounding out the top 3 in steals at 1.4. Next, we're going to move on to the end of year awards predictions and who we think is going to win it all at the end of the season. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce Matt to the podcast to share his thoughts and predictions on the end of the season. Thanks for joining us today, Matt.
Thanks, Jake, for having me. It's an absolute privilege to be here today. I think Toronto will win the Eastern Conference. They're 3 games ahead on top of the table, and I think they're gonna run away with it. I think with their fixture and everything, I think they'll finish first. I think it's a little bit too big of a gap for Boston to come back from. In the West, it's actually really interesting because you've got the 3 teams who are very clearly in the top 3, and then it's so close between 4th and 9th. It's 2 games in it, so there's so many different options in the East that could happen. But Houston, I think, will definitely win it. They're 7.5 games clear. It's going to be really interesting to see the final stage of the season, particularly when you get into the Western Conference playoff, which you would assume will be Golden State and Houston, but as you know, with sport, there's always surprises. The NBA Finals, it's, as I just said, in the West, it'll be really interesting between Houston and Golden State. Portland and the Spurs are obviously, and OKC are obviously around the mark, but they're going to have a big final series to go deep into the playoffs. But I'd say, I don't want to say Houston or Golden State. I think they both can do something. I can't pick them. I can't at the moment split them to say they'll be the playoff winner, but I'm very confident it'll be one of the 2. In the East, the Philadelphia 76ers have had a great run. They've won the last 10, but their biggest issue is Joel Embiid. With his injury out for 2 to 4 weeks, who knows how big of an impact that would be. If you say you're going to lose the best player in your team, in any team, I think every team in the competition would struggle with that sort of loss. Cleveland, the LeBron show, it's hard. It's hard to, when you've got a player of LeBron's capabilities, you can always go quite deep. But I think Toronto, they've looked sensational to watch all season. So I'm gonna back Toronto here, but only just to win the Eastern Conference Finals. As far as MVPs and major awards go, for MVP, I'd actually have to go James Harden. His year has been sensational. It's very hard to come up with a player that's had a better year than he has. Obviously, you've always got LeBron around, but I'd have to say, you have to say that James Harden's got it over LeBron. As far as Rookie of the Year, it's Ben Simmons. Absolutely Ben Simmons. He's got a record, beaten Magic Johnson in most triple doubles in rookie season. Yes, he's not got the all-time record, but he's beaten Magic Johnson, which is a huge achievement. He's got, I think it's 11 or 12 triple doubles this year off the top of my head. He's just been an absolute revelation for the 76ers, and you'd think that would push them in great stead in the playoffs, and is one of the main reasons why they're going to go deep in the playoffs. Their form, they've won their last 10 games. They're the informed team of the comp, and Ben Simmons is one of the big reasons for that, along with Joel Embiid. So thanks, Jake, for having me. It's, as I said earlier, an absolute privilege to be joining you tonight and talking a bit about basketball, the NBA, and I hope to come back soon.
Thanks, Matt. It's been great to have you as well as your input, thoughts and predictions on the rest of the 2017-18 NBA season. Now, for my predictions, the champs I had as Golden State Warriors, but I'm not sure whether they have a few injuries at the moment, which I'm not sure are going to help them along the way. Steph Curry is out until probably first round of the playoffs. He won't play in that first round. Obviously now, Houston will probably finish top in the Western Conference, but my prediction at the start of the year was Golden State, so I've obviously got that one wrong there. I still think Golden State will make... Obviously now, Houston will probably finish top in the Western Conference, but my prediction at the start of the year was Golden State, so I've obviously got that one wrong there. I still think Golden State will make the NBA Finals, as I think their strength is the postseason, and I think they'll dominate through there. The East I had at the start of the year was Boston. Unfortunately, in the very first game of the season, they lost Gordon Hayward to a severe ankle injury and have been not hindered. I would say they've actually done well to be at 51-23 at the moment, in the second seed at the moment. This year, I think, is going to be Boston to make the NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors. I know all the Cleveland fans won't be too happy with that, but I think it's Boston's time. I think it's Kyrie shown enough this year that he can get back to the NBA Finals and lead a team. I don't know whether they'll actually win the NBA Finals itself. I think Golden State are going to win their third in a few years, and Boston will make it, but not win it, I'd say. So at the start of the year, I gave some of my predictions on who might win some of the awards towards the end of the season. For my league MVP at the start of the season, I went with Kevin Durant. I thought he was going to step up his game even more. I think he has, but just not to that MVP standard. I think he'll still feature maybe around the mark, but I think there's been a few more players that have been a little bit better than him this year. So I don't think he will be in the top three when they announce those. I think the top three for the MVP this year will be LeBron James. He's had a fantastic season, again, shooting the ball so much better than he has as he's getting older, which is phenomenal. He's averaging 27 points, 8 rebounds and 9 assists per game. It's insane. I think another will be James Harden, averaging 30 plus points per game, 8.7 assists and 5.4 rebounds, including almost 2 steals a game as well. My third one is a bit of a roughie, but I think he will sneak in there over a couple. I've gone with Anthony Davis. He's had a monster second half of the season, and I think he is roared straight into MVP contention. I think he will finish in the top 3 for the MVP, because this season he's been averaging 28 points, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, but most importantly 2.5 blocks as well. Next we have the 6-man award for this season. At the start of the season I picked Jordan Clarkson, who was originally from the LA Lakers, and that obviously hasn't gone too well as he's been traded to the Cavaliers at the deadline. So usually they don't tend to go for the players who have switched teams between the season. In saying that, I do think he will finish in the top 3 of the MVP award. He's been averaging 14 points, 3 assists and 3 rebounds per game. I think he'll finish in the top 3. It hasn't been a big year for the 6-man award. Another guy who I think will finish in this top 3 is Will Barton from the Denver Nuggets. He's had a fantastic year, improved on last year, and has been great coming off the bench for the Nuggets all seasons, averaging 15 points, 5 rebounds and 4 assists per game. But my other nomination for the 6-man award this year is going to be Lou Williams from the LA Clippers. He's been absolutely dominant. He's had one of his seasons to remember, one of his best in his career, and I think it's pretty much already unanimous on who's going to win the 6-man award. Lou's been averaging 23 points, 5.5 rebounds and 5.5 assists per game this season for the LA Clippers coming off the bench. He's been huge, knocking down threes. He's first in fourth quarter scoring for the NBA. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I think he will win the Sixth Man Award for the second time, first time being with the Toronto Raptors. Next we have is the Most Improved Award. I had Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets at the start of the season. He's had pretty much the same kind of year as he did last year, so I wouldn't expect him to be in the top three when it comes to picking the award winner for this category. The three that I think will be in the top three are Victor Oladipo from the Indiana Pacers, Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics, and Clint Capella from the Houston Rockets, the big man. I just think these three have shown a lot through this season. Capella's gone from 12.5 points, 8 rebounds, and 1 assist last season to 14 points, 11 rebounds, and he's come up to 2 blocks per game this season. With Jaylen Brown, he had a bit of a quiet start to his career, being 6-3-1, but this year has shone brightly and delivered a great season this year, and has gone 15 points, 5 rebounds and 2 assists. So that's why I think those two can be considered for this award. Victor Oladipo, last year he was at the Oklahoma City Thunder with Russell Westbrook as the point guard. He was averaging 16, 4 and 2.5 assists. This season though, he's absolutely shone and delivered 23 points, 3 rebounds and 4 assists for the Indiana Pacers, starting for them at the shooting guard position. If I was to pick one of my 3 that I've chosen there, I would probably go with Victor Oladipo. Just for the points factor and the assists factor, I think he's shown a lot of improvement and has done very well without having Russell Westbrook by his side. Next award that I predicted at the start of the year was the Defensive Player of the Year award. I've clearly got this one wrong, as at the start of the season I picked Kawhi Leonard. He has been out most of the season, so he obviously will not win this award. I've gone... First of all, the special mention I had was to Draymond Green, who averaged 8 rebounds, 1.7 blocks, and 1.5 assists. I had him just on the outside of my top 3. Funnily enough, my top 3 are all big men. I've gone with Andre Drummond. He's had a huge season this year, averaging 16 rebounds, 1.7 blocks, and 1.5 steals. Then next I've gone Rudy Gobert. He's been nominated before, I believe, and I think may have won it. I'm unsure about that. He's averaged 10.8 rebounds, 1.9 blocks, and a steal this year, starting for the Utah Jazz. And the last one I've gone with Anthony Davis, actually. He's been averaging 11 boards, 2.4 blocks per game, and a steal and a half per game as well. You just wouldn't think those numbers, but those defensive numbers are great from Anthony Davis, and he's just shown what a great player he is going to be and has been already. So I think he may be a chance to win that award. Who I think might win out of those 3, I would probably say Andre Drummond. I think he deserves it. I think he's had a good start to his career. He's only still very young, and I think 16 boards and almost 2 blocks a game, you can't really go past that. And he's been leading pretty much rebounds all year. He's been dominating at centre for the Pistons. I think he'd be my choice for Defensive Player of the Year. Next we move on to one of the fun ones, Rookie of the Year. At the start of the year, I picked Jason Tatum, who the Celtics picked at pick 3 this season. I think he's a chance. I think he's in my top 3, who I think will get selected at the end of the year. He's averaged 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists, including 1 block a game and 1 steal a game. He was my pick at the start of the year. I don't know if he'll win it. Next I've got in my top 3 is the surprise packet, actually, of Donovan Mitchell. He's had a huge year. There's been a lot of talk about him this season. He's been starting for the Utah Jazz at the shooting guard position. He's averaging an astonishing 20 points per game in his rookie season. He's averaging 3.7 rebounds and 3.6 assists, along with 1.5 steals per game. Utah Jazz picked up him at pick 15, I believe, in last year's draft. The same year as Tatum's draft. My third selection is probably an obvious one. Ben Simmons obviously didn't play in his first year, so he's still eligible to win Rookie of the Year this year, because this year's considered his first professional NBA season. As you heard with the rookie stats before that I mentioned, he's almost leading rookies in every category besides points. He's averaging 16 points per game, 8 assists, 8 rebounds, 1.8 steals per game, and a block. It's just an astonishing season for Ben Simmons, and I think it's kind of obvious that he should win it. I think some people might think Mitchell might win it just because of his explosiveness and his ability to score points, but all in all, it really should be Ben Simmons. He's had a great year, and it'll be one for the Aussies. Moving on to the last award is the Coach of the Year award. I had fun choosing the final 3 for this award. At the start of the year, I picked Brad Stevens from the Celtics to finish as Coach of the Year. I don't think he will win it, to be honest. I think he'll be in the top 3, as he's got his Celtics to 51-23 with the injury of Gordon Hayward in the very first game of the season. I think he's done an outstanding job, and I think he's one of the best coaches in the NBA. He would be in my top 3, I would say. Then I've gone for a different one. I've gone for Dwayne Casey of the Toronto Raptors. His Raptors at 55-20, leading the Eastern Conference. I think he's done a fantastic job with the squad that he has. He's gotten so much out of Lowry and DeRozan, and I think he should be in line for Coach of the Year. My last nomination is going to be Mike D'Antoni, obviously. He's taken his Houston Rockets to a 61-14 record this season. With the addition of Chris Paul, is huge for this record. I think my heart would like to see Dwayne Casey win the award, because I think he's done a magnificent job with the squad that he has available to him and gotten his team to first in the East. But then again, Mike D'Antoni, 61-14 with the Houston Rockets, top of the West, the better conference. Heart says Casey. If I was to go with my head, I would say D'Antoni will get the nod over Dwayne Casey. Well, that's all we have time for on today's podcast. As there's only 2 weeks left in the NBA season, I'm going to look to do a podcast for each of those weeks, looking at teams' win-loss ratios for those 2 weeks heading into playoffs, news that comes through from each team over the next week, and also any injuries that may happen. I'd like to thank you for listening in, and also I'd like again to thank Matt for joining us for the first time on the podcast, and look forward to having him on again in future shows. As always, Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at NBJBpod and on SoundCloud as No Brains Just Ball. And make sure you tune in to next week's podcast.